In the company of Britain's most compelling commentator, Darren Grimes, director of Reasoned UK, a popular Conservative channel. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Mark.
Now, Darren, I know, like me, you appreciate and welcome a bit of healthy competition on the national airwaves, which is why talk of Andrew Neil's new project, a 24-hour rolling news channel called GB News, is fantastic because we can't have too much of a plurality of views. I think some of the existing news networks have become very dull and predictable. But there are members of the political establishment who are very worried about GB News. Tell me more.
Well, yes, there's a campaign called Stop Funding Hate, and they are so incensed by this channel, which hasn't even launched yet, that they're already suggesting that it be defunded if its advertisers pull out because they're saying that this is going to be a Fox News style channel. Well, how on earth could they possibly know that, for one? And secondly, it would be impossible to have a partisan channel to that degree in this country because of Ofcom rules, the broadcaster that regulates the channels like GB News. Although I dare say it's a mystery to me, Mark, how the likes of Channel 4 News gets away with it, mind. But I'd suggest that these people at Stop Funding Hate go out for a long walk because it looks like they need to take a major chill pill. It hasn't launched yet. Make up your minds when it has.
Well, indeed so. And I just don't believe in shutting down any views. We have, as you said, wonderful checks and balances in this country, unlike in the United States. We have Ofcom, who are fantastic at making sure that people don't lie on the radio and that they don't spread misinformation. And I think they do a fantastic job. And therefore, I've got nothing to worry about in terms of any future impartiality. Who are Stop Funding Hate? I mean, do we know the people behind this?
Well, look, I mean, Douglas Murray tweeted the other day saying, there's celebrity backers and all the rest of it. I mean, to be honest with you, it doesn't, at the end of the day, it seems to be, it's not just them, right? We've seen that there seems to be a sort of lineup of left-leaning voices who all perhaps have found a natural ally in the likes of the BBC. They're so woke, it wonders if they ever go to sleep. I mean, the reason that they hate GB News so much, without it being launched yet, I can't stress that enough. I don't know anything about it. Andrew Neil is probably the only man in the land that knows anything about what the channel's content, etc. will be like. But they hate it so much because it wants to offer an alternative. It wants to offer impartial and diverse views. And the fear that the sort of arrogant, kale-munching Islantonians seem to confident in their sort of liberal left assumptions that they must be shared with by every sensible person in this country, up and down, all four constituent parts of it, that they are so incensed that anyone would dare think that they could offer an alternative. And it has got me thinking at the end of the day, why is it they're so desperate to silence them? And the reaction to it really does remind me, it sort of harks back to the response to Brexit, this idea that the plebs don't know what's right for them, Mark. Yeah. We need our liberal betters to tell us what's good news to consume or what to vote for. And perhaps that's why they're so clearly scared of GB News being a hit from the off.
Well, I take my lead from Fleet Street, actually, Darren, because I think we have the best press in the world. And I love the fact that we have The Guardian on the left and I guess The Telegraph on the right. And there will be times when I'm reading The Guardian and I'll agree with some of it, disagree with others. I think they've been a bit hysterical about COVID and a bit negative about Brexit. And then I'll read The Telegraph. And I'm glad that both of those publications exist because that is an ecosystem in which free speech is to the fore. And it just worries me that there are organised groups of quite powerful people who are trying to stop free speech on the national airwaves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the voices was Jolyon Maugham QC, a member of the Queen's Council, and at the end of the day, if these people are so confident, Mark, if they are absolutely certain that there isn't a market for GB News, that no one wants to listen to an alternative news channel, then why are they so hell-bent on pressuring advertisers to ditch it before it's even launched? These people are the sort of people that wax lyrical about diversity, yet they seek to extinguish the diversity of thought. And God forbid our cultural and media elites should permit us to think differently to them on TV, Mark.
Well, indeed, brilliantly put, Darren, and I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, may we long have a media in which divergent voices are given airtime and we can disagree with each other and have a discourse, not shut down debate and become the thought police, because that is the way of North Korea and the People's Republic of China. Can we talk about the NHS? Because that's the one in which debate is often shut down too. Nobody is suggesting the abolition of the National Health Service, but if you were to dare to criticise it or suggest reform, you would be burned at the stake.
Exactly. And I mean, I guess I'd sort of preface my remarks by saying that I obviously believe that the NHS has doctors and nurses that must be among some of the most hardworking people in the country, especially over the past, 12 months. Whilst also believing, though, that the NHS perhaps hasn't performed as well as other countries around the world, especially on healthcare outcomes. Primarily, Mark, in keeping people alive, even before the pandemic, the NHS has tended to lag behind other countries around the world. And the Institute of Economic Affairs have a paper out today basically arguing along similar lines. And now the attack that tends to come whenever they hear that is, well, look, Darren, it's Tory cuts that are leaving the NHS in such a perilous state. And I say, well, actually, as you know, Mark, we've seen record sums poured into the NHS. It's got that 350 million quid a week and then some. And yet the overly centralised system has uniquely struggled. The only thing that we've really sort of managed to, I think, be a world leader on is the vaccine rollout scheme.
Yeah.
But it does strike me that if saving lives, which I would hope everyone would agree with me, should be the raison d'etre of a healthcare system, is the peak goal, the biggest aspiration that we all have, then it strikes me that allowing that conversation to be had, allowing that conversation that says, well, is the NHS working? If not, why not? You know, do nurses really need to go through years and years of degrees to become nurses? These sorts of questions, if we can't, again, it goes back to that earlier point you made about GB News. If we're not able to actually speak freely, if we're not able to actually, through the parameters of debate and speech, articulate ideas and different viewpoints to actually advance as a society, then I'm afraid we're sort of up the Swanee without a paddle.
Well, I completely agree. And I think when we have the mother of all inquiries, we will have a look at the pandemic strategy across the board, including in the NHS, preparedness for the pandemic, insufficient ICU, and also a health service that has presided over Britain becoming the sick man of Europe. We've got extraordinary levels of obesity. I interviewed Tom Watson, former deputy leader of the Labour Party, who has lost 8 stone by changing his lifestyle. And he points out in his fantastic book, Downsizing, that type 2 diabetes, which is a lifestyle-related condition in most cases, has doubled in 20 years. Now, that's not the fault of the NHS, but that's something that the NHS needs to think about, which is prevention of illness rather than dealing with the consequences.
The problem that is well with the NHS is that these sorts of issues, at the end of the day, it should be a matter, I believe, of personal responsibility, but it never can be because of our centralised healthcare system, where protecting the NHS is the ultimate goal at all times. In my view, if you want to stuff your face and end up with diabetes, then that's up to you. You should be able to make that decision as an autonomous individual. I don't think the NHS has a right to tell someone that they can and cannot have that extra donut or extra 10 donuts or whatever it is that you're shoving down your gullet. But we can't even have that conversation about personal responsibility, because everything leads back to, well, you've got to do this to protect the NHS. And I think another area of conversation that must be had is around mental health, in which those who've been sidelined to protect a certain vulnerable group from the effects of the coronavirus are placed on 6 months waiting lists at the moment by the NHS. And in my view, it would be morally reprehensible to expect someone to wait anything like that were they to have, say, broken their leg. So I think there are multiple conversations that we need to be having about the sort of, I guess, gargantuan National Health Service. Let's not forget, I think it's the biggest employer in the world, and actually have these conversations about what's working, what isn't working. Obviously, the vaccine rollout, as I say, world leading. That was fantastic, phenomenal. We should be so proud of what we've done there.
Well,
But then
indeed.
in other points, we have failed, and I think we need to be honest about those and actually be able to have those difficult conversations.
Well, indeed. And my team have been at work on the numbers in terms of NHS funding. According to the King's Fund, the UK government's putting in approximately 130 million per week. We can debate whether that falls short of the 350 million on the side of the bus, Brexit, all the rest of it. But actually, Darren, I wonder whether money is a red herring when it comes to the NHS, because actually a lot of the reforms might not be a case of taking money away, but just changing the way the NHS works for the better and becoming more efficient.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And efficient doesn't need to be a watchword for, cuts of, certainly shouldn't be cuts of nurses and doctors, but, the NHS has an extraordinary bureaucracy, an absolutely I mean, how many times,
managers
Mark,
on six-figure sums?
Exactly. How many times have you seen advertisements for NHS trusts advertising for diversity teams and all the rest of it? That's just, this is a nonsense. This is cartoon. It's a grand waste of taxpayer cash, and a grand shame, actually, that it's not going on ensuring that we do have more nurses and doctors, because that's what we need, especially now, I guess more than ever. And it's those sorts of reforms. It's making it easier to get the nurses we need. I mean, how many nurses? I've certainly spoken to many older people who say, back when I was a nurse, you didn't have to go through all the rigmarole that you do now. Of course, you have to be trained, and you have to have certain, I guess, qualifications that may mean you're right for the job. But how many people, for example, signed up as volunteers for the NHS in that original, the first lockdown? How many of those people would perhaps be ideally suited to become nurses and all the rest of it? It's those sorts of things where actually I think bureaucracy becomes a hindrance rather than a help. And that's certainly the case in, I think, the sort of organization, a behemoth like the NHS.
Fantastic work, as always, Darren. Brilliant stuff.